It's not starting.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of KLF. And I have with me Savie Karnel, who's published a children's book called Nameless God. Hi, Savie. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Pallavi. Lovely to be on the show. Thank you for having me here.
So, childhood, as you grow up, you lose a little bit of your childhood and you keep losing a little bit of it and more of it as you age and as you move around in the real world with real people where emotions like greed and envy and communalism and the difference between one person and the other and the sort of invisible boundaries that have been set into society sort of become more and more real, and you realize them a lot more as you age. So children are sort of free and not so free from this world. They have like it's like secondhand smoke that you sort of experience all the disaster around you, but you don't really internalize it in a way because you don't really understand it. So you've written a fascinating book which is relevant in these particularly polarizing times, where you mentioned that children are can sort of find a middle path for themselves and create a god for themselves if they don't want to choose from what exists. So I'd like you to first walk us through the book a little bit, and if I want you to talk about the plot a little bit, about the story of these two kids, Noor and Bachu, how they meet and how they the kind of god that they imagine. So if you could just lay out the plot for the reader.
Like the book in The Nameless God, it's a story of two kids who hold imagination, who hold friendship above all. And that there's a childhood where their imagination runs wild. And for them, nothing is impossible. Like Bachu and Noor come from two different communities. And like the most of India, they live together despite their religious differences. And as we say, if we look into ourselves, in the majority of Indians, it doesn't matter to them what religion their friend belongs to. And that's how Noor and Bachu are. And through this story, like most kids, their most important wish is to get a holiday. And Bachu wants a holiday and he prays to God because they have their results coming and they know that they're not going to fare well. And in a small town, they have a Ganeshji temple and a Fakir Baba's Dargah where people of all faiths pray gods. And yet they do not get a day off and their results are out and they're fair. And that sets them both thinking, like, why is it that God does not answer our prayer? So they are critical thinkers, both of whatever is, told to them. They have to figure it out on their own. And they kind of come to a conclusion that perhaps the gods are overburdened with work. Like imagine a God sitting under a tree and about 100 students, 100 children coming to him and asking for the same thing. What will happen? They will like, the God may not be able to figure out whom to give. And just like most teachers, perhaps they have their favorites. In this case, maybe their favorites. They know how to butter them and get their things done. They come to a solution that they should create a new God, a God who would know only them, no other child. In doing this, their new God has no other option but to grant their wishes. And that's how they create a new God, mixing both their faith, both their rituals of both the religions, what they have seen being followed at home, and they create their new God and pray to him. And they pray for a holiday, for a day off, and they get it. Their God seems to work and their first miracle is done. But this day off is because the Babri Masjid has been demolished and riots have been sparked off throughout the country. And that's how the story goes. Like when these kids are in the riots, will this new God help them? Will their new faith come to their rescue? So that's the story of the nameless god.
That's
And later on,
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
and then later on, we just see how how their friendship uh, stays through the
Evolve.
test of times, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
reigns high.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So coming to children, the way children live political realities of the day. You've mentioned the Babri Masjid demolition, and in fact, in one of your earlier interviews, you even talked about how you were in a small town in Karnataka when the Babri
Mhm.
Masjid demolition happened, and it also rubbed off on you as a child. Like you had like it sort of impacted you as well. So if you could, just give me a little personal instance of like what aspect of your past, especially that past when you were living the Babri Masjid demolition, and as you lived it so many miles away, hundreds of miles away from where it actually happened, what part of that did you bring to the book when you were penning it?
Well, thankfully, I lived in a small town, which I can say so far has never ever witnessed a riot.
Yeah,
And people live very peacefully there. I've seen people coexist, without any tension. Never ever. And I guess
mm,
that harmony, what I've seen there, I kind of bring to the book. The fir- and when the riots, when in 92 and 93, there was tension throughout the country.
yeah,
Though I didn't witness it firsthand in Karwar, the town which I grew up, there were a lot of people who lived there, who went to work to Bombay, who came back
yeah,
because Bombay was burning. Mumbai was
yeah,
burning, they came back, and I saw them struggling. I heard stories of what they went through, what they saw.
yeah,
And there was nearby towns, nearby places which were burning, and we've seen peacefully coexisting societies being polarized.
yeah,
So those kind of were etched in my memory. And I guess the most important thing is the harmonious living which I witnessed in my town. That, despite all this, people went out to help each other, you know,
yeah,
and their religious faith, the barriers did not matter. What mattered
mm,
to them was that, okay, this particular person is my neighbor, and or this particular person is my friend. And this sentiment was held in high esteem. So I
mm,
wanted to propagate that to the children these days. So that's why I thought that this book had to be written, and that's what I've brought in, to the book. The friendship and the relationships that I have seen survive through the test of riots and the test of time.
yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, even as a genre, if you look at say probably children's books that say Malgudi Days that R.K. Narayan wrote, he had set the story in a very small town like Malgudi, which was not sort of directly involved in the freedom struggle, but it also witnessed the freedom struggle in the passing. Like some leader got arrested somewhere, and there's some Swadeshi movement happening, and these little children, Swami and friends, those children who are playing, and the backdrop of the freedom movement. So in
Mm.
India, like the juxtaposing, small town innocence and like the peace and simplicity of small town life in the backdrop of these big cities that are burning and big cities that are epicenters of violence and riots and all things wrong and sort of the big bad world. Do you think as a as a literary tool it really works in a country like India where it shows you parallel realities, and it's also like comic relief where there's so much tragedy but there's some ease and some comic and like some sort of happiness that coexists?
Well, it does. If you say the I mean, the big cities in India are handful. You can just count them on your fingers.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, there seems to be a problem here. Savvy, can you hear me or see me? I think we've lost her. I think just let's give us. Yeah, are you back on?
Yeah, I'm back
All
on.
right,
Yes.
perfect. Yes. So you were
Yeah.
saying,
I was saying that in India, the big cities or the metros are handful. You can actually count them on your fingers. But the
yeah,
majority of India is still consists of small towns.
yeah,
And And that's how I guess. And even when you look at our cities, there are smaller localities which
Mm.
still, have the small town living in them, the
Yeah.
small town culture in them.
Yeah.
So I guess as a literary backdrop, it does work because it
Mm.
helps you be honest.
Yeah.
Because that's what the most of India is doing.
Yeah.
And it helps brings out the sentiments, the relationship, the emotions,
Yeah.
and there is no clutter of the big city there.
Yeah.
You can have your focus restricted
Yeah.
without being diverse with the distractions
Absolutely,
of life.
absolutely. And also, it's like in more than, say, a Bombay versus and a Delhi versus a Karwar. It's also one small town that's in a problematic space versus another small town that's living in harmony. Because if you see, a lot of our Indian, like our struggle for freedom, didn't take place in Delhi or Bombay or Calcutta. I mean, Calcutta,
Yeah.
yes, Delhi, yes, in some bits, but it also took place in, places like Dandi or Chori Chora, or Ayodhya is a small town in itself. It's not a big city. It's not a metro, but of course, like juxtaposing, because we have such a huge country and we have so many cities speaking different languages, and every town has its own ways. So it just gets easier and more fun to tell a story the way you have.
Yeah, it does have fun, and I guess a small town setting has it more of this innocence in it, and more
Yes,
of
yes,
elements which are may not be which may not be
yeah,
found in a big town, which kind of
yeah,
makes it interesting, and
yeah,
maybe brings in some novelty too.
yes, yes. I also felt that, like, for instance, there's one thing that I've always felt is that the content for, children in India, for instance, although you've said this book is actually for a child who's 9+, but if we talk
Mhm.
about the genre of, children's books, or where children play, key characters, it's there are a lot of Western imports. Like you have, say, a story like story like Cinderella to a nursery rhyme like Humpty Dumpty. So these are things which people, regardless of whether they're in a small town in India, a tier 2, tier 3 city, or a metro, whatever, you will grow up on all this content. It will somehow reach you. Because of course there's a channel of, marketing and branding and merchandising, and there's a whole machinery that puts, this sort of Western content for children out there to the world. Do you think we can create indigenous content which is relevant to present day realities, the way you have done? You've juxtaposed it into, like, very very realities of today, like in the here and now. Do you think such content has a market, and what are the challenges in, like, putting this kind of content out, given that communalism and secularism, these topics, this is a bit of a contentious space?
Well, I mean, talking about children's publishing in India, I would say there
Yeah,
are some amazing books already, which are
yeah,
bringing out Indian stories.
yeah,
But of course, there was a time when we had a lot of Western stories. We still do have, and they are very good books. I mean, they
yeah,
are good books in their own space. But
yeah,
talking about Indian stories where Indian children can connect to or find relation with, I guess these days there are a lot of writers and many publishing houses bringing out Indian stories,
mm,
and they're finding a good market as well. And this Indian writing has already established itself in the Indian market, because if you go out and see, I mean, though we may not know it, but when you look at what children are reading these, they are reading Indian authors also along with their Western counterparts. And I say it is necessary for them to read both. We cannot force something upon children. They'll
yeah,
pick up what they like.
yeah,
Yeah, and they are and they like our Indian writers, because in our Indian writers are telling them stories. They're telling about maybe the dahi vadas and biryanis, and not necessarily of scones and cakes. Though these
yeah.
days everything is available, unlike our times wherein we had to, figure out what they were. But
Exactly,
yeah,
exactly. So content
but
has become a lot more relatable for the Indian child today, to be able to develop
yes,
an imagination that sort of suits, or that sort of fits their reality as they live it.
as they live it. And plus, as
Yeah.
for an Indian market, I guess, if I'm not mistaken, we have about the second largest or the largest English speaking readers in the world.
Yeah.
and stories connecting to them, stories about them
Yeah. Yeah.
are going to be easily picked up.
Yeah.
They just have to discover it.
Yes.
And as of now, and the marketing is so good of
Yeah.
that Indian books are found in shelves of every bookstores.
Yes.
Even on
Hopefully,
Amazon,
that
Indian,
that should be the trend. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, if you see that Indian books are trending.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah, I guess
yeah.
we are in a good
Interesting.
space.
Yes. Certainly, because if it's relatable, then even someone who's say an enthusiast of political science will pick it up, saying that, oh, this. You're also looking at a social space, a political space, a space where children grow up to become adults, and how tense that space is, how much friction there is. So it's a lot wider than just a basic book, which concerns children's lives. It's a lot beyond
Yeah.
that.
So I guess we are wrong when we think that the political space around us does not affect children. That's no
Yeah,
longer the case. I
correct.
mean, parents do think that they're protecting the children. I mean, restricting information to children.
Yeah,
But these days, everyone has a mobile phone because with the advent of smart devices being affordable, most of the kids they are open to what's happening around. We
correct.
kids do watch news.
Yeah,
They are exposed to propaganda on
yeah,
social media,
yes,
and most importantly, they listen to discussions around them.
yeah,
Because even if you see in my book, I mean, nobody's telling the kids what's happening. It's just that
yeah,
the children are picking it up from the environment.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's what's happening in every house. Parents discuss, children listen. They are exposed to the news. They're exposed to social media. So I guess I mean they are kids these days are more politically aware than maybe they were some years ago.
yeah.
And these issues can be addressed in children's books. So there's nothing is none of it is going to be alien to them.
Precisely,
Plus,
precisely. Yeah. Yeah, go
and
on.
plus like some kids they have reached out to me, messaged me, and wrote reviews, reached to me on Facebook, and
Yeah.
surprise, and not a single kid
Yeah.
has ever has told me about the context or the background being unrelatable. They
Yeah.
have been able to follow it and they have loved the story, which for me also I was a little bit skeptical about kids of these age of maybe of 2021 relating to a story in 92,
Hmm.
but they somehow have found a connect to it.
Yeah, of course.
So
That goes without saying. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess kids these days are more aware and more prepared to deal with any subject that's given to them.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Like for instance, let's take the example of mythology. Like mythology is also televised for the child differently. There are cartoons on Krishna, on Bhim. Chota Bhim is such a rage, and in fact, it's a whole industry that runs around Chota Bhim and merchandise. And these are characters that are broadly that sort of the border on characters of faith and religious figures. So there'll be like Krishna or like even little Ganesha was a big thing. I think it's called Little Ganesha or something. There was a character around Ganeshji and all of that. So when content around religion is consumed like that, then it's already packaged with a degree of innocence, with a degree of sort of friendliness, and sort of to familiarize the child with the God, and not even the intention to do that is even not that. It's just that you're sort of telling a story for the child and sort of stripping it of its seriousness, of its tensions, of its hierarchy, of its like protocol that religion has to be done followed like this and that. So what about that space? Because I remember once I met a kid, like it's some distant relative of mine, and they said that for her Ganesh ji and Krishan ji and all these gods are not they're not gods, they're characters from comics or a TV show. So that kind of interpretation also sort of eases you into the space and takes the tension away.
Well, yeah, for most kids, because of the televisation of mythology, for them, they are, I guess, you can put it in two ways. You can say that for them, they are no longer gods. Maybe for them, they are superheroes,
Yeah,
but superheroes who are akin to gods. But if you see in the positive sense of the thing, in
yeah,
a way, then they are coming closer to these, great figures or great God. They're coming closer
Yeah.
in a way. In the sense, they
Yeah.
do not have that fear. In fact,
Yeah.
they're happily imbibing the virtues and the good qualities that are propagated through these, maybe these televised animated programs on mythological figures. So I guess if at all I mean, it's a good thing if they look at them as superheroes and imbibe their virtues, and then they do not have that inhibition towards reaching out to that god. So I guess that's a good thing. I mean, if children are enjoying it, it's a see, even when we were kids, we didn't have these animated programs on gods, but we did have our elders, our grandparents, our parents telling
Yeah.
these stories to us as bedtime
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah.
But we loved them the same way. Just that
Yeah.
now maybe the medium is, they have got a new medium, and
Yeah.
perhaps the relationship we shared with gods when we listen to the stories and what these kids today share
Yeah.
with the
Of
gods
course.
through the animations are perhaps the same. So I guess
Yeah.
new medium should be welcome, because times are changing and everything has to change with time.
Yeah. So in that case, it won't be a nameless god or a new god. It will be the same god, but repackaged and more empathetic and like a different interpretation, a very innocent interpretation of the Lord.
Yeah, I guess the best part about Indian stories are that they can be interpreted in many ways. That was
Yeah.
kind of, our stories kind of make us open our minds. They broaden our horizon. They give us the leeway to think of things in
Yeah.
different ways, and they do not restrict us to one particular school of thought. And that's a beautiful thing, I think.
Precisely, precisely. Now, coming to your this certain philosophy also embedded in the concept of a nameless god. Like, for instance, the 13th Greek god is Agnostus Theosis, which is an unknown god. And as strange as it may seem, there's a temple dedicated to the unknown god. So there's each religion or each civilization leaves a certain space open to abstraction, open to this anonymity, a sort of a vacuum where they've not really been able to define what's going to happen. Like even for Vishnu, they say that Vishnu will have an avatar that comes up in this era, and like comes up in the sort of the last avatar of Vishnu, which is made for Kali Yuga. So there's something that they sort of which has they've not like quite tied it up together. They've left it loose and they've left it open to interpretation. It's more ambiguous in nature. At least that's my interpretation of how that the last avatar of Vishnu is. But I feel like it's also a philosophy that hey, this is something nameless. This is something that's that it's open to interpretation, and it can be open to a child's interpretation as well. So did you delve deeper into sort of this philosophy when you came up with the book and the concept of the book?
Well, see, I know of the philosophy of, I mean, just like, I think, just like the Greeks, even we Indians do think of a Nirgun, Nirakar God,
Yeah.
right, of a formless God.
Yeah.
But when I wrote the story as such, my focus was not really on the philosophy of God as such.
Yeah.
It was more on the innocence of the children. So
Yeah.
just when because for kids maybe of 10 years, I mean, philosophy does not hold so much of importance to them as their
Hmm.
immediate needs and their
Hmm.
friends. So their immediate need being a holiday and maybe a good marks. It was that I gave them the leeway of creating a god.
Hmm.
For them, the idea of God is that of a friend,
Hmm.
of someone who listens to them, someone
Hmm.
who they feel close to, who they can go and talk to, or who could
Yeah.
grant their wishes. And then as in the story, they pick up a pebble and they think that, okay, let us call him a god. They haven't dwelled into the philosophy. See, though I
Hmm.
have been, I have known the philosophy, I was trying to put myself in a child's shoes
Yeah.
of how a 10-year-old would think. And I
Yeah.
thought in my characters, Bachu and Noor being 10,
Yeah.
they would not think so much. They would just think of their immediately having someone to pray to. And that's
Yeah.
when they create, and maybe Bachu uses some vermilion and put some agarbattis, and he gets in a green, or Noor gets a green cloth, and they dressed up their god and they pray to him. The
Yes.
only
Yes.
sole aim being, that their wish be granted.
Yes.
So, and with this, their pure intentions, they create the god. And after I finished writing the story, I realized that that I hadn't given the god a name. Though the
Hmm.
kids had given him for him or her a form, they didn't
Yeah.
give a name.
Yeah.
And but without even the name, they
Yes.
had already created a god who was by them, irrespective of what they called them or how they worshipped.
Yeah.
So it was just their belief that created it. So I didn't feel the need of giving a name. It seemed to work just well without a name, because it just seemed to work just purely on the power of the beliefs of the kid and their innocence. So I kept the name. That's why I just kept the name as the nameless god.
Yes.
But
Yes.
later on in the story, the ending, I've left it open, so it's
Yes.
again left to interpretation. If you want it to be formless or whatever.
Yes.
Mhm.
Interestingly, most religion actually starts out, most of religion actually starts out like this, to cater to a very innocent need of, like, people who are, children at heart, who believe that they're vulnerable and that they need somebody to look out for them. And that emotion of faith is, even in adults, is innocence. You're looking, you want someone to protect you. If someone is dying, you suddenly want a miracle. When you're expecting good results in your exams, although you're working hard, you still want some sort of divine intervention. So I feel religion becomes political and becomes a space of contention when it becomes cardized, when structures come into it, when money comes into it, when it spreads. Like how a political idea at first can seem pure and can seem like very, like, an answer to your problem, but eventually as it grows it turns into a big monster, like a Frankenstein's monster, which is something else, and then it has all the vices of the world enshrined in it. So do you think, like, an evolution, like your book is probably like the beginning of something, like if you had to write, say, a series of like 7 books on the nameless god, by the time they get to the 7th book, these two kids are grown ups, and then they have carters, and then they have like people following them, and how godmen, or spirituality also grows into some organizations. Do you think it's innocent because it's the beginning of something?
Well, I guess every beginning is innocent,
Yeah.
and we've seen it around us with things beginning as an innocent, very innocently. Like if you go around our villages, we do have, sometimes you just maybe walk around to a place, there's a tree, there's a stone, and after a couple of days, you just see that you have some flowers on the stone, and maybe
Yeah.
some diya burning there. Perhaps because
Yeah.
some person who went there found solace in there,
Yeah.
and maybe they prayed and they felt that they felt someone protecting there. And
Mm.
with that innocence, with that belief, we've seen a new god being formed in every place here. People do
Yes.
form, and I guess it is the belief of the people which make any place or any shrine or any small shrine that people begin with, make it powerful and make and help, and it kind of helps people also, because
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, it could help many people. It could help, give hope, because people do need hope. They look out to something that maybe they feel someone holding their hand, and a belief as in does help them. But it can happen in certain cases that as the following grows, there could be some other person who comes here, and maybe
Yeah,
an
of course.
opportunity
Yeah.
person takes opportunity for his or her own, um, you know, for own, and then
Yeah.
corrupt it. So
Of
that is
course.
possible.
Yeah. I
That is
mean, it's happened throughout history. We've seen that, religions have expanded, and like the whole point was to grow a religion, to get more followers, and to just religions became organizations, which is why a lot of people started detesting religion and started questioning the point of religion as well. But it does become a political movement that involves a lot of money, a lot of people, a lot of power, and the way even say if you look at any of the older religions, they're big empires in themselves. So of course
because
it's possible for people to feel lost in a big religion and to want something more personal for themselves.
right, because I guess whenever something, maybe a god is created, and whenever a religion is formed, then it does
Yeah,
not reach, the center is not the god alone. Then the center
yeah,
is no longer just the people's beliefs. It
correct,
expands, and it when it expands, it gets in more humans,
exactly.
and
Yeah,
I guess then it slowly becomes more human and less godly, and that's how I
exactly,
guess things change over time.
exactly.
So, and yeah, just as you said, we've seen those things happening around us, and it is quite possible.
Yeah, also given the kind of like the religions that we already have, they might not be a one size fits all policy there, where I may go into my religion and feel like my religion is offering me everything, so I may seek something else. Like I may seek like a personal, I think you've said this earlier in one of your interviews, that you believe in something personal. Like you may feel religious at times because it sort of helps you in the moment. It sort of
Yeah,
helps you, makes life easier, so it's a solution. It's also, there's a lot of utilitarian purpose to a religion at the end of the day. But ultimately
yeah,
you may
I
not,
guess.
sort of, you may not want to subscribe to one thought or one broad idea of, say, the Gita or the Bible, or this is how I'm going to live my life.
Yeah, true. I guess since we are all humans, we
Yeah,
do look at something utilitarian everywhere. We want
correct,
something to be useful to us. Otherwise,
exactly.
we would not really require it. And I guess
Yeah,
the same is with religion as well. We
yeah,
are okay with it as long as we find it useful. So I
yeah.
guess that's something natural to us.
Exactly. And for some people it may be use, and for other people it may also be a sense of identity, like although, people would say, okay, religion is not an identity, but like there are a lot of people who may not have any other identity other than the religion. So, maybe being associated with a larger organization, or that's giving you identity, that's making you, rooted. It's sort of society's way of keeping anarchy out.
Yeah, it is. It's a way to keep anarchy out. Plus, I guess there are different ways a person looks at religion. And I
Hmm.
guess every way should be welcome, as
Yeah,
long as that particular person is comfortable with it. So,
yeah,
and I guess even if somebody else may not agree to what I say, or maybe
yeah,
I may not agree to what somebody else feels about,
yeah,
religion or whatever it is. But I
yeah.
guess everyone's way should be respected,
Of
and
course.
everyone should be free to follow whatever he or she finds it comfortable, what they feel is going to help them in their daily life.
Yes. So
So
now,
yeah,
coming to stories, coming to interesting children's stories, there are a lot of messages that children's stories have for, adults and for actual, our social political realities as we live them. So one of the stories is Gulliver's Travels, like what better way to, explain that sort of a personality cult, or like one person rising above the system and sort of looking everyone else from where everyone else's concerns seem really really small. So something like
yeah.
that, if you could tell me some of your stories which have had an impact on your growing up years, not as a child, but say when you started working, or in your older life, like some life lessons that you've drawn from a couple of stories.
Okay. But I would say, similar to Gulliver's Travel, I would say the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
quite very similar, where you have someone who comes and who pretends to be a wizard and controls
yeah,
everything. So I guess that story is quite relevant to things happening these days worldwide.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so I guess That's one story I could tell you about.
Yeah. But what about in
Yeah.
your personal life? Like,
Okay, in my personal life.
yeah, some story that that has had an impact on you. Because at the end of the day, we are trapped in some story or the other at some time or the other. So it's always you're living one story after another, or certain sections from certain stories. So that's usually how writers live, and I feel that's usually how people live. They're just not conscious of it. Writers are conscious of it because they think like that.
Yeah, but if you say, I guess the story which impacted me a lot, and then which I could say I loved every word was Kafka's Metamorphosis. So
Ah,
I guess everyone in one point of time you feel that you're Gregor Samsa. You're somewhere, maybe
yeah,
you turn into a cockroach one fine day in the morning, and suddenly you
exactly.
feel that nobody wants you.
Reply or yeah,
Yeah. So no, everyone feels, I guess, that wants to feel wanted, and I think in most of us we have the fear that someday maybe I'm not good enough and nobody will want me. So I guess in that story he kind of got the human sensibility so very well. So I loved it, that story. Then there's the Little Prince. There's a book, The Little Prince by Saint Exupéry. Though I loved it because of this simplicity. It tells you about a simple thing as love. And I guess when it comes to writing, simplicity is the most difficult to achieve. I
yeah,
guess it's easy to be complicated, to maybe
yeah,
easy to beat around the bush and sound intelligent, but to just to bring it down to and cut it down to a simple in
yeah,
simple words is the most difficult part.
yeah.
So yeah, that was the maybe another story that really had an impact on me. And I have a lot of stories of Manto
Ah, okay.
getting the the Indian society, projecting the
Yeah,
Indian society, their mannerisms, and the pain that people went through during partition.
yeah,
I guess I'm. I don't think. I mean, he's done in the best possible way. Wherein I haven't lived during the partition time, but I can feel the pain when I read him.
yes,
Yeah, and similar things. I think even now, though there are no partition, but you can see
yeah,
similar pain these days in people.
yeah. It's also
Uh,
because you mentioned Manto, like a lot of this partition literature is, you don't really, I mean, it's easier for us to connect to the partition because it happened in our country, but most of it is we relate to the pain and the conflict, like any other good, work of fiction. You're not really relating to the situation as much as you're relating to the emotion. So which is why I think your book also, because it has a lot of these honest emotions that make you think like a child and make you think like, oh, these are the systems that I'm existing within, and then maybe I should question them, and maybe there is a sort of an alternate way to think.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, in a way, yeah. I guess I tried to bring in the emotions. And when I wrote the story, The Nameless God, even what
yeah,
I really wanted to get in was the emotions of the child and the
yeah,
mind of a child.
yeah,
I tried to think like a child, maybe go back to my childhood
yeah,
and think back the way I would think. So most
yeah.
often what happened, and I've tried not to be preachy. If you read the book, you'll see
That's
it's just a simple
challenge.
story told
Yeah, yeah.
because nobody likes to be preached.
Yeah.
Children
That's,
especially do not.
that's actually, I wanted to, one of my questions to you was that, which I was going to ask you next, is that,
Yeah.
when you're writing a, children's book, and when you're, concerning children, even as a mother, you
Mhm.
sort of tend to get preachy. It's a slippery slope that, you might, throw in words which are like more like pronouncements than say the written word and like open to interpretation. It's more like, hey, I'm saying this and this is how it is. This is the last word. So how do you sort of, as in a writing technique, how do you avoid that, situation?
Yeah. I did do it consciously, try to avoid it. But I guess I didn't use any specific technique as such. I just thought like a child. I just
Yeah,
thought, what if I were a 10-year-old? And would I like it? I just simply thought like a child and I simply wrote.
Yeah.
There wasn't any of, and I've consciously, I didn't want to be preachy because I've seen, most people, what they children, what parents also want is, to have books to have morals,
Yeah.
as in, like this is how you should behave, this is how you should
Exactly.
not. Yeah, I have not tried to do that. I've tried to keep that away. I've tried
Yeah.
to just show that this is how children are, so
Yeah.
that when a child sees, so he sees it that, okay, this is how I am. Like in the first chapter, the book opens with Bachu praying to God that some big man or maybe a minister dies because he wants a holiday. Somebody dies, he gets a holiday.
Yeah.
Why? It may at first sound, like, that is not how what children should do. This should not be done. But children do that. We have all done that. In fact,
Yeah.
I have gotten lots of reviews and comments from people from grown ups saying that we did that when I was a child.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I told the child, I have told a story from a child's perspective. So
Of
yeah,
course,
and
yeah,
then
I have done it, and I've like grown up with guilt also at having done it. Like I remember, I was in a convent Christian school, and one of the nuns and some others, somebody had passed away, and all of us were so happy that we were getting a week off. So because I mean,
yeah,
we didn't, not that we are disrespectful towards the dead, but this for
exactly.
us what matters is that week off. We're getting a week off
Yes.
for yeah,
But the thing is, what I have tried to be as honest as possible.
yes,
So, yeah, I mean, I could be very moralistic saying that no, you should not be praying like this or you should not be
yeah,
doing like that. But that's not the way children are. That's how we elders, we
yeah,
perceive children are. There are different ways. We perceive children to be in a particular mold and we
correct,
try to fit them into that mold,
yeah.
which may not exactly be true. We may just be fooling ourselves. So,
Absolutely. And writing a children's book, I'm sorry to cut you, writing a
yeah,
children's book, bereft of, this, binary of good and bad and good and evil, and which is what essentially children's books and the genre that associates, that, concerns children. Any kind of work of art that concerns children will always have a good and a bad. So you've sort of not, gone into that space at all, in fact, with the book.
no, I have not. I've simply told the story from the eyes of two children, of what they see as. And then it's left to them. The focus is just their friendship and their imagination they view God. And rest all is a background of whatever is happening around them. So
Yeah.
I've tried to, and many people have told me that the book is funny, it's hilarious. Like a
Yes.
mother reached out to me saying that, she got two books. And the daughter first didn't pick up the Nameless God because it sounded serious. But
Mm.
when the mother started reading it, the mother was laughing and giggling throughout. And then so the child pulled it from her and read it. And she loved
Mm.
it and she was laughing throughout. So I guess the humor in the book has also because of the honesty in the book. Because I have been honest to
Yeah.
a child's emotions. So
Yes.
I guess this humor is everywhere around us. We just turn a blind eye to it. We just try to paint things as proper and improper. And that's where we keep the humor out. So I guess I've just been in the shoes of a child, being honest with whatever maybe I felt when I was 10 and whatever I think children feel. And I was surprised that children feel the same because even children of 2021 seem to relate to the feelings.
That's true.
So
That's
I guess,
true.
yeah.
Yeah. Also, do you think as a society we are becoming largely humorless because we are not able to tolerate any kind of humor on any subject? For instance, we, especially when it concerns religion, or it concerns the functioning of societies, or any sort of view that you put out is either it's either loved or hated, and there's a section that will hate it or love it at the same time, which is of course polarization. So if do you think that we are a humorless society, and that really impacts children because all they consume all the time is hate? through social media, through TV, through, I mean, if imagine if you're living in a house with a child and you want to watch the news in a prime time, you watch only polarization and on all kinds of people fighting with each other, and there's so much hate and rage and all of that. So it's how difficult is it to, and humor is not spared either. I mean, you can try and crack a joke and then get into trouble for it. So where is the space for humor really in a story like this?
Where here I would say that I haven't cracked jokes, but I have simply told a story. The
Yeah,
humor is in our daily lives. The
yeah,
humor is in the day-to-day interactions of the kids amongst
yeah,
themselves, about the way they think, the way they
yeah,
dream, the way
yeah,
they perceive what is happening between their elder people, within their talking. So
yeah.
that's the humor part, I guess. I mean, I just had to look around me
Yes,
and bring it out in the book. And there's, I think, to bring in humor, you not necessarily have to try and hurt anyone's sentiments. We just have to look around us. And I guess, yeah,
absolutely.
we
Yeah.
do not have to feel offended for everything.
Yeah, that's true. But hope doesn't offend or doesn't, make any sort of controversies around it or whatever. It's just a story that of children living a certain reality.
Yeah.
So nice. Do we have any questions that we can take? If the organizers could just flash some questions. So there is a question here. It's by Akanksha. She's saying, "The nameless God, hats off to the author. It felt like I'm there with Noor and Bachu experiencing everything. It's a page turner for me. People who don't prefer reading, for them, it's the starting line." I can't see the rest of the question, but yeah, this is someone praising a book. It doesn't seem like question, seems more like someone praising it, or I can't see the whole thing. Can the whole thing be flashed? So I guess it's a very relatable novel, and you must have got a lot of
Right.
these messages and emails from
I
people.
I would say thank you, Akanksha, for this lovely message. It's very encouraging. I'm so happy that you could relate and you could experience everything with Noor and Bachu. Thanks a lot, Akanksha.
There's another nice comment from Tripti. She's saying, "Awesome."
Thank you, Tripti.
Okay, Sammy is saying, "So true. Expansion of religion makes it less godly."
Yeah, true. Religion can, get difficult. Yes,
Yes, reiterating
true.
the point that actually we also
Yeah,
made
which we
a while
discussed
ago.
sometime
That becomes a movement and about money and power.
back. Right, we did.
So there's a lot of praise pouring in for you from adults who have discovered the child in them and discovered that reality is actually simpler than we imagine it to be, and it's not as complicated. And the boundaries that we've drawn around us are probably just drawn by hand, and they're all man-made. They're not. They haven't existed, since time immemorial. So Akanksha is again saying worth a buy. Awesome. So these are like a lot of. There's a lot of
Yeah.
fan that you're getting on
But
KLF.
and I'm standing as a telling you, I'm so surprised and I'm so happy that there are older people, there are grown-up people who are liking the book. That
That's
means the
true.
child within each of us never dies. We every one of us has a child in us. This
Yeah. I
this
think
I
I think
guess
the child sort of dies and is waiting to be reborn, or sort of it maybe doesn't die but hides,
it
and then
hides. Yeah,
comes
you're right.
whenever such a moment happens when they read a text like this, or is it a song from their childhood or whatever, certain memories that live on. But it's necessary to keep that child alive in you, because children can know that they can make mistakes. Children can apologize. Children do a lot of things that adults, don't easily do. They're hesitant to do.
Yeah, children do not have this compartmentalization of improper, proper, should not. And I guess their imagination is just free. They can imagine whatever they want, create whatever they want. And I get we as adults should let them do it and not, restrict them or let them discover themselves, let them discover their beliefs and not force ours on them.
Exactly, exactly. It's also about like a lot of imagination is lost in the way we in seeking a career for ourselves and seeking like jobs that can fit into a market, and by sort of getting trained for livelihoods, which is a reality. I mean, like, a lot of imagination is lost, and you may have like a lot of imagination in art and craft in you, but if the market doesn't really demand it, so you give up on all that and give up on that fun side of yours.
Yeah, most of us, I guess, we are forced to do that.
You're forced to do that, correct?
Yeah, but some of us who are lucky enough or maybe privileged enough
Yeah.
can follow our passions. But in reality, the majority of people have mouths to feed,
Yeah.
have families to look after.
Yeah.
And though it may sound unrealistic, but sometimes passion doesn't always pay. Perhaps that's why. But these days, what we see is people are, despite their day jobs, they are finding time to follow their passion and keep their imagination alive, which is a beautiful trend.
Yeah.
And I guess I hope more and more people, get the time and the resources to follow their passion. Let's hope
Exactly.
for
Absolutely.
everyone.
And also, people are finding ways to make their passions marketable, and, maybe make a living around their passions. Of course, but we're only talking about a very privileged, small little fraction of Indian society. Rest of it is still a lot very, determined by the work, the livelihoods, and like feeding the mouths, like you said, and a lot of burden. I mean, childhood may last a lot longer if you have money and privilege, but it may end, very quickly if you don't. So
Yeah.
all that reality is if there. I think we've. Are there any more questions? Pooja Tomar is saying I can relate to it. Okay, this is a question. Are you planning to write another book or a sequel to this book, Adventures of Noor or Bachu or Seema?
Well, so far I haven't thought about it,
It'll be a
but
bit of a challenge to write because I think the best line that's come out of this conversation is that the beginning is always innocent.
yeah,
So
it
I think
is.
you'll be less innocent than the first book if you write the sequel, and a little more challenging.
Yeah, I guess to it will be challenging to keep up to whatever the nameless god is. But let's see. So far, nothing of as of now, no plans as of now. As of now, nothing.
All right, do we have any other waiting for its sequel? Here you go. There's another one who's waiting for your sequel.
Mhm.
So there's a nice comment here. This book is made for all, beautifully framed, the concept just to fit into the hearts of every individual. So
Oh,
that's
thank you, Archana. I'm so
uh,
happy, Archana, that you could connect to the book. Thank you,
so
Sujit.
all must read.
Oh, oh yeah, yeah, Harpreet. I hope you read it, and I hope you enjoy reading it.
Lovely, lovely. Wow. So a lot of fan mail is pouring in. So I think this was a wonderful session, Savvy. And if there's any other question, if or fan mail, we'll flash it on the screen.
Okay. And it was wonderful talking to you as well, Pallavi.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
I
really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you, thank you. I loved your the not just the concept, but the simplicity with which you've written the book. And like you said, you've retained the innocence of a child and retained like how a child can thinks in terms of not just if the a child's thoughts are stripped of all the vices of the world and all of those things. I feel like it just comes across. You're not just saying that, you've actually done that in the book. So you may have you now have this idea about what your book is after authors usually know what they're going to write, but I think you're the sort of author who's written it and then knows. So that's
Yeah,
the
I could say that.
that's the impression that I got from the book. So
Yeah.
there's one more comment from Akanksha only. She's saying the true meaning of God has been explained in an awesome way, waiting for more books from Savvy. So a lot of
Oh,
people, I think, spiritually
thank you,
connected
Akanksha.
to you now.
Yeah, that seemed to, I mean, yeah, but thank you, Akanksha. Let's hope to write more books. Thank you for
Yes.
reading The Nameless God.
We also hope that you write more books, and maybe if not a sequel to this, then maybe another story of another two children in another city, in like in another state. So there's so many different states and so many different childhoods that are,
Yeah, it is.
coexisting at the same time, that are being lived out at the same time. So maybe we can expect a lot more children's books from you. Also,
Okay.
the content is also so relevant to our times, which makes it so beautiful.
Yeah, I will try to. And I guess with the beautiful part of the Nameless God is, I guess,
Yeah,
that small town Junu where the story takes place.
yeah,
I know when I wrote it, I didn't think of a particular place. It could just be any town in India
yeah,
because most towns in India live harmoniously. We
exactly.
do, love our neighbors irrespective of our religious boundaries. So
Yeah,
yeah, so let's hope we get. Let's hope I
yeah.
find more stories to tell.
Yes, this is reminding me of a beginning of a Rishikesh Mukherjee movie where they're introducing the cast and they're saying Jaga Bharat, and then they say Bharat mein kahin nahi. So it's just so left to the audience. At the same time, just shows goes on to show that life is being lived in a similar way, despite the diversities, despite the borders of our states, despite the languages, and there's beautiful unity in our diversity, which I think only authors like you and books like yours bring out once in a while.
But yeah, thing is, if you think about what is India, I feel India isn't a map or drawn on a paper, isn't an area between some lines. But
Yeah,
India is this idea where people live together with in love and in harmony, irrespective of our differences of religion, culture, language.
yeah,
Despite all its differences, India is a concept where people live happily together. So I guess if you take this kind of diversity out of India, then the
yeah,
whole concept of India changes. So I guess
absolutely,
that is the beauty of India. The
absolutely.
idea of India is this
Yeah.
harmony, is this secularism, is this idea of holding relationships and friendships above everything else.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the idea of India, and anybody who reads your book will take away that idea of India with them. So thank you so much, Savvy, for joining us. This was a delightful session, and for once, usually I mostly do sessions on politics and economics and those subjects, but I think this was such a heartwarming, enduring session and an enduring book. So thank you so much for writing this book and for speaking to KLF.
And thank you, Pallavi, for having me here. And thank
All
you for
right,
the wonderful conversation.
great. Okay, so we are closing the session now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you
Thank you.
for joining us on this live broadcast.
Thank you, KLF.